Welcome to Chicatac Adams Heritage Park. This is a very special place, and right now we're in the interpretive shelter, but I like to call it our time machine, because when you're here, you're transported back in time to when this site was an ancient tribal village, when the Ohlone people lived here. We have scientific evidence that shows people lived here as far back as 2,700 years ago.
Wow.
From present date. And it was inhabited from then up until the late 1700s during the Mission era.
So that's like basically the time of the Stonehenge when they started coming down.
Think about it, 700 BC,
Yeah.
people were living here, and they had an ongoing community for more than 2,500 years.
Yeah.
This was a permanent village because there was a large supply of natural resources in this area.
So natural resources, you're talking about maybe the water, the food? What would
Absolutely. The people who lived here were hunters and gatherers. They hunted the animals they needed, they ate the meat, they used the animal fur for clothing, the bones for making tools. They gathered the plants that they needed. They knew which plants to use for food, which plants for medicine,
Wow.
which plants they could use for various shelters. So tule was very abundant. It's a reed that grows in freshwater wetlands. So a lot of tule was available. So they had tule houses primarily as their shelters. But one of the foods that they gathered from oak trees were acorns. So they had granaries to store the acorn. That was one of their basic food supplies. So it was actually a pretty good life here due to the abundance of natural resources. And we're just a few feet away from Yagas Creek, which provided a round source of fresh running water.
So how big would a village be? I mean, how
Typical village for the Ohlone people throughout the Bay Area. Now, the area they inhabited was the entire San Francisco Bay Area, Monterey Bay Area. So Chicatac is just one of those tribal village sites.
Right.
Typical village, maybe between 50 to 250 people.
Wow, that's a good size.
Well, for hunter and gatherer society, that's pretty reasonable. All it could sustain.
Yeah. So tell us about the pictographs here.
Well, this is actually a petroglyph.
Petroglyph. Right?
Petroglyph. That's a type of rock art that's either carved or pecked or chiseled into a rock surface. So what you see here, this was a large piece of sandstone that was down in Lewis Creek. This was brought up here in the late 1980s. It actually took a helicopter to bring it up here.
Wow.
Well, archaeologists knew they had something special. And when you look at it carefully, you can see the circular patterns, a circle within a circle, concentric rings. This is a type of rock art called a cup and ring petroglyph. Cup and ring. So you can notice the center and then the rings of circles coming around it. But it's very difficult to see. Well, this was probably made almost 3,000 years ago before present.
So what is the significance of the rings? I mean, there's some spiritual significance or astronomy or something?
We know it was important to the culture of the people who lived in this area. We don't know exactly what it means, although the same type of cup and ring pattern has been found throughout the world.
Oh, yeah.
So we know it's more than just art for art's sake. It has a meaning for the culture of the people who created it. So obviously, 3,000 years ago, if these patterns appeared in many locations, it could have been something in their natural world that inspired them to do that. Some of the things I've read said it could be related to a ceremony for rainmaking. If you think about the natural world, when you see raindrops falling in a puddle, what kind of pattern is it in?
That's right.
Propagation of waves. You throw a pebble into the water. It leaves the dimension of air, enters the dimension of the water. Again, the waves propagate. So it could be for a ceremony relating to rainmaking, or it could be something more abstract. One of the things I've read, it could be for a ceremony when children pass into adulthood. So we don't know. We do know it's more than art for art's sake. This one thing I've been holding, just so everyone understands, this is a clapper stick. This is a rhythm instrument to keep the beat. When they had ceremonies here at Chicatac Park, because Chicatac in the Mamutsan language, it means dance place, or place of the dance. So when they had ceremonial dances, they kept the beat with the clapper stick. This comes from a branch of the elderberry tree.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The Ohlone also called it, in their language, the music tree. So in addition to clapper sticks, you could make flutes or whistles from the branches.
So it's basically a beat on the tom or something?
It just keeps the beat, just like we use drums when we're dancing today. But for ceremonies and rituals, you can imagine many people with clapper sticks.
That sounds like a great present for kids at Christmas time.
And here at Chicatac Family Day, they have Native American people who will teach you how to make clapper sticks and flutes and whistles.
Wow.
So you can do a hands-on project here today and take one home as a souvenir.
Yeah, the oral tradition was a very important part of all of the Native American culture. My father he was actually the original historian, storyteller of the family.
Oh, wow.
He's 83 now and is gotten on in years, and so he's sort of passed tradition to myself. Since I've been hearing the same story since I was 8, I just decided as he started becoming unable to do the events, he says, from now on, everybody, call my son instead of, and so that's when they started calling me. That's how I was invited to this event. But we had a lot of fun doing it and carrying on the tradition. And my dad, of course, is very important. He, in addition to doing storytelling, he also writes children's books. And so he keeps a lot of the tradition alive, either through the oral tradition or through his publications.
Yeah. I see the coyote here. I know coyote is a very important character, I guess, in the Native American tradition of storytelling.
Yeah,
the trickster kind of guy.
Yeah, he's always the rascal, you know.
Rascal?
And so he's always got but he's also the tradition was using stories to teach character traits to the children. And so Coyote was sort of the folk hero in that he's the rascal, but he comes across in stories of redemption. He comes across in stories of getting your comeuppance. He comes across in stories of helping out your neighbor, and then also being the problem to your neighbor. So he's sort of the everyman. That's why he's always a focal point of all the storytelling. And he's just a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah. This comical character for the kids.
Right.
So for the Native Americans who lived maybe here in this village, would they every night gather around like the campfire, and some elder would maybe tell a story, or how would that work?
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot known about how the actual community worked around what the routine, I guess you would call it is. But we do know that a lot of these traditions were passed down just through all history. Even to today, a lot of the stories, and even now, when you look at the stories today, they're mixed even with early Carmel history. So the pure story from where it originally started was probably modified by the storyteller, and it ended up having a little bit more flavor of the next storyteller and then the next storyteller, till my father tells stories that also include like iPods and the internet, and it's all kind of mixed in, just that way the culture evolved, but the stories still stay the same and they still have the same message.
Well, that's the beauty, I guess, of the oral tradition. It evolves for the society, and I mean, the Trojan War, probably was a real war, but then it evolved with Helen and all the other things.
Right.
Probably the same with the stories of the Native Americans.
And that's one of the ways we kept it applicable to all the kids. As they grew up, they still walked away with the character message that was the point of the story. So
what's one of your favorite short stories?
That's giving you the answer to the test. If I do that, I'll be storytelling in a couple of minutes here. But there's a couple of Coyote is always the favorite, but I always like the stories where the slowpoke or somebody, the underdog, comes out as the hero. And that's one of them that I'm planning on telling today. It's a story of Turtle, and he comes out to be he's the underdog, and he comes out to save the day, and those are always the favorite because everybody feels that way at some time, right?
It seems like there's common themes in all the stories, and that unites us all as, I guess, humans. There's the underdog achieves,
Right.
wins the day. And
there's one other little story I always like to tell, and it's that when you listen to the songs at powwows, and they'll put a little tail on the end of the song, and a lot of people don't realize the reason we did that was when the Creator made the earth and all the animal people, he told the animal people and the Indian people that you are equal to all, superior to none, that everybody was created equal.
Beautiful.
And the Indian people said that's not true because all the animal people have tails, and we don't have a tail. So they fixed that by putting tails on the ends of their songs. So just the way it all sort of ties back together, which is the character trait that we try to pass down. So.
Well, Alfonso, thanks so much for enlightening us about the storytelling tradition.
I'm glad you came by. Are you going to be able to hang out and hear a story?
Yeah, I would love to. We're here with Kitty Monahan, who's one of the founders, I guess, of the park, or one of the developers of the park.
Yeah, I was on the Parks Commission when we developed this park, yes.
So this park is a very special park for you, isn't it?
For me it is, because it was being vandalized. Most families were having a good time here, swimming in the Yagas River right below us here. But the graffiti that was going on with all of our rock art was getting way beyond what it should be. And so a consultant was formed who did a bunch of rock art. He was a rock artist, I guess you would say.
Rock artist.
Yeah.
Rock star.
He was one a geologist who knew all about this particular park. And so we got a consultant who developed moving the rock out of the area so that it could be protected, and then having it moved back once this park was developed into what it is today. This beautiful.
So we have to remember this was a home for many thousands of years for.
Yeah, and for many thousands from Indian. And I'm from Quicksilver Park, and I know that the Indians brought cinnabar from there over to here to trade.
Oh wow!
And so we have that connection between.
What was the cinnabar used for?
The cinnabar was used at Quicksilver to amalgam to make mercury.
Well, what would the Indians use it for?
They would use it for paint.
Paint. And
they had used it in paint for the mission in Santa Clara. And that's how the miner found it. He was a Castellero, came through. He was sent by the Mexican government to kick Sutter out of his fort.
Oh, wow.
But so then that cinnabar, the Indians for years and years were cutting into the hillside in Quicksilver and bringing it over here once a year. They did trades. And that's how we have abalone, and that's how we have onyx and all over at Quicksilver that wasn't there. It was brought from here.
So really the Indians were a bunch of capitalists. They were just kind of moving about and trading stuff?
Yeah, they had, once a year, they had powwows where they got together all the different tribes. And this was one of their favorite spots. And then eventually it became a school. So Adams School site. But
for white people that came later
well,
on.
whoever was living around here,
right.
Whatever families came, sure. And the Indians eventually moved away, moved out of here when it became populated.
A lot of the Indians went to the San Juan Bautista mission.
Yes, so they did that. They went to Santa Clara mission.
Santa Clara mission.
Yeah,
so
they wandered around quite a bit. Yeah. But this house right here is to resemble one of their smokehouses that protected the families and kept them from the elements. So, yeah.
Well, thanks so much,
all right,
Kitty.
Sure. Yeah, this is one of our favorite parks. So.
We're here with Judy Kessler, who's a docent for the park here. And Judy, what have you got here in terms of some of the exhibits you got?
Well, I exclusively have a display of the black-tailed deer and the usage of the deer of the Amamutsan Ohlone people and the Ohlone Nation people. This is a very important aspect of their diet and also their resources for living. They utilize every part of the deer. Not only was the meat used, the sinew is used as well. It came from the muscle and tendon for sewing and to putting together garments. The deer hide was used for clothing as well as utilitarian objects. So the deer itself is very important.
So there was a real important relationship for the Native Americans here and the deer in terms of using their survival and I guess their comfort and making tools and so would the men would go out I guess and hunt a deer. So how would they go about hunting?
Well, I think one of the things that they did was go into the sweat house and they prayed about it, and they also used that time to just purify themselves, take off any human sin before they went out, and ask for blessings from Creator to be able to hunt. But what's really important, I think, that people are just learning now is that they would only take what they needed. They didn't take an overabundance of things where they would out hunt an area. So they always made sure their resources were kept well. And that's a really important aspect to
So
it.
a real respect for nature and the resources,
Absolutely.
and don't take more than you can.
Absolutely. And also, I think the honor and respect of the animal that was used.
I noticed when the storyteller was telling the story, he would talk about the fur people or the feather people,
That's
and
right.
they saw other creatures as people too, in
Absolutely.
different forms. So.
Absolutely. I know in my language, which is Oglala Lakota, we have the standing people, which are the trees.
Oh.
The wingeds, which are the flying birds. The four-leggeds and the two-leggeds. The creepy crawlers. You know, those that are in the water.
Very different perspective from the Eurocentric type of view, where nature needs to be dominated and conquered. So it's
And instead, with Native people, we believe in living in
harmony.
harmony and in respect and honor with all of creation.
It's a lesson I think we still need to learn in our modern world. So. We're with Marianne, and she's going to talk about the native herbs that were from this area and how the.
So some of the traditional plants that were used for medicine, for food, and also for, well, I'm not talking about basketry today, so just medicine and food mostly.
Oh, okay. So what was so important in terms of the use of herbs? Did they use it for medicine or headaches, or how did they use it?
Well, a good example is yerba buena, which we have some yerba buena tea right here.
And yerba buena means good
It
herb,
means
right?
good herb in Spanish. So when the Spanish came and they learned from the native people about all of these important plants, they gave them Spanish names. And that's a perfect name for this plant. It was used for stomach aches, for colds, but also it could be used in a very, very strong concentration even to kill worms.
Oh, wow.
So it can be a very powerful plant or a very gentle plant depending on the concentration that you use. So yerba buena is here. This is the little plant growing in a pot, but it's a very common herb in the woods. A lot of times you probably stepped on it and didn't even know what you were stepping on, but it is very easy to grow in your garden. So people want to have one of these traditional historic plants. Almost any native plant nursery will probably have this. And just find a shady spot for it. It'll take off. I've been showing people how to make the little bundles to make the tea. You can make it fresh from the fresh leaves or dry it and make it from there.
So what else do we have here? We have some
We've got-
interesting herbs, blueberries I see, or what do you have there?
These are elderberries.
Elderberries.
Right here. And elderberry, as you probably already heard, was very important in terms of making tools.
Oh yeah.
The elderberry needed to be pruned in order to do that. So to get those nice straight shoots, you need to prune that plant. Every 2-3 years, you're going to have different sizes of shoots on there. But one of the things that happens after you prune, the next year you also get bigger bunches of berries.
Oh.
So you not only produce more tools, but you also produce more food. And that's really true. People's knowledge came down through hundreds, thousands of years of elders passing down this knowledge. They knew these plants very, very well, and they knew how to make them produce
So
more food.
they cultivated them to make.
They did. Through that knowledge, they were really able to take what was an abundant landscape and make it even more productive for them.
So what do you have here?
This is bay laurel.
Oh.
Most people know about bay laurel leaves, but not everybody knows about the fruit. There's a little fruit that appears on the bay tree late in the fall and into the winter time. You harvest these after they fall to the ground. You take the outside fleshy part off. You let these dry out for a few months, and then you can roast them. And inside is a little kernel, and it has a stimulant in it, kind of like caffeine. So everybody needs, sometimes needs a little pick-me-up, and the bay nuts serve that purpose. So different people in different parts of California use them in different ways, and probably even different Ohlone groups use them in different ways. But that's one of the uses for the bay tree.
Wow.
And of course the leaves smell wonderful. So
I've
sometimes
crushed
just hang
them
in
and
the,
put them on my nose, and I get a headache from it.
Yes,
because
you can. Yeah, because it's a very powerful plant. So people used it in their homes kind of as an air freshener, but also to repel different insects. And you can still use that for the same purpose today.
Oh yeah.
A few of the flower seeds, everybody talks about acorns, but an awful lot of food came from seed plants. And sometimes seed plants that we don't really think of as seed plants, like red maize. So a little bitty flower that you see sometimes in the woods. But in the old days, people used to burn. And so this is what a red maize plant looks like the year after a burn. It's big, it's sprawly, and you can clearly see how somebody could get many, many pounds of these little seeds, because they're tiny.
Oh, yeah. So,
but they're very nutritious.
great. Okay. We're here with Jan Schreiner, a park interpreter, and what do you have here? What kind of exhibit are you going to show for people?
Well, today we have our pump drills and cordage. So the pump drills are something that were brought in with the Spanish-speaking people. They have a slight mechanical advantage to the style where there used to be a stick and a sharp stone that people would rub. Well, you've probably seen when they create fire, when people create fire, they do the same motion on a stick. With the fire, they have a hearth, but with this, they would be just drilling a hole into kind of a shell. A lot of the native people's baskets of this area were decorated with all kinds of shell, and a lot of times it was a clam shell made into a circle with a small hole in the middle. So they certain people spend a lot of time making holes through shells, believe it or not. And then the other thing I'm showing the children, we call it cordage now in English. People in the old times would have used plant material or even sinew from animals to create a kind of a string or cord, and these days we're just using raffia for the children. And a lot of people don't want to use sinew anymore. It takes a fair amount of chewing, I understand. Even for this necklace that I got from the Amamutsun people, when I asked them what kind of string is that, because I was thinking maybe they use some traditional materials, and they call it some sort of a synthetic cord or synthetic sinew, because nobody wants to chew it anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame them. Doesn't sound like fun.
No, chewing the sinew is a part of creating cordage in old times that would be really strong and be really fine, so that it'd be sinew cordage would be used to tie, say, a tip of an arrow to the little shaft, or maybe like the drill I was just talking about, the old style drill. So today is a modernized drill slightly.
So when they made jewelry like you have there, would it be typically women who wore it, or men or women? I mean, was it like women today, they like to have their jewelry, or what would it be like?
I think it's sort of a little more significant in things like this one. I don't know how to describe it, but it wouldn't just be decorative. I mean, it definitely fit into a theme.
Rituals.
Yeah, but people of old times would have been very careful with these things. Very, very careful. And a lot of gifting or great care was taken with these things.
Well, there's so much work and time and effort that went into creating something beautiful. I mean, they must have prized it rather than if they just went to a jewelry store and got it. And so maybe pass it down from generation to generation.
Right.
It's softening it. And if you look down at my pants, oh man, it looks like I have a really bad case of dandruff here, because it's falling out. So I want to do that. I want to get rid of all these little flakes if I can. And it ends up with this wonderful, soft, silky material that we can use for makes. Yeah? So now we got strawberry blonde hair here. Okay, so this is what you're going to make your string out of. I'm going to save this little piece. And you just go along there. See how much softer that feels right there? It's right here. So you're going to make it all soft. This is the dogbane plant, and has this reddish colored stalk. It has opposite leaves. And this one is just a start this year. So we took a root stalk from a plant that's growing in our backyard and potted it. And it sits in a little bit of water down here. They like their feet a little wet.
So I'm assuming dogbane is what you use to make the...
Dogbane is our cordage plant, and it has this red colored fiber that was used to create this carrying bag.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
And this one's one my husband Dino Labistic made. And what I'm working on is a supply of
dogbane cordage so that I can make one also.
Oh, wow.
So this is what I'm working on.
So how long would it take to make that amount of cordage?
That's one of those questions that I don't have a good answer for, because it takes such a long time that I don't record it.
Oh.
Probably so I don't discourage myself from doing these projects. So I never really know.
Yeah.
But I would say if you don't count the time to go gather it,
It's a process.
it probably takes about a couple minutes to get a stalk all cleaned and split and the fiber off of it, and then it probably takes another couple minutes to turn it into cordage. So if you're talking 4 minutes and a piece of cord about that long.
Oh, that's not that long.
That's not too bad.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That's what I'm guessing. You can time me.
No, it's fine. No, I was thinking it would take a long time to make it, but
In this state, this plant is not good to gather.
right.
Yeah, it's full of latex. This is a similar plant. These two plants were important in this area. This one's milkweed. This one's dogbane.
Milkweed, yeah, wow.
And milkweed has this white-colored, silky fiber inside of it. The dogbane can be pink to almost red in the fiber that comes off of this plant.
Wow.
So, but both of those were used in this part of California. So I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to process this. So what I'll do is I'll take my knife, I'm going to scrape it lightly. Now if I were doing this 300 years ago, I would have used a piece of obsidian or chert to do the scraping.
This might have been also like a social thing where everybody kind of gathered around and chatted and
You know, in the
gossiped
workplace today, we are discouraged from talking with each other, and they didn't have those kind of workplace rules back then.
Yeah. So
yeah.
it's sort of a, maybe a family thing where they did it as a family and chatted and how was your day, honey?
Well, I'm sure people talked about whatever was important at the time, and some of these skills are skills that you can just kind of do while you talk and while you have fun. Others take so much concentration that it's probably not real practical to be social while you're doing it.
Oh yeah.
But at least not actively engaged in a heated conversation. So at any rate, now like here I just got that just a little too deep and I lost a little fiber there, so I'm trying not to get that deep. You can see this material coming off. That's what I'm trying to get rid of. I'm just taking the outer bark off. Now I'm not going to get it all off by doing this.
Right.
But I'm going to get enough of it off so that I'll have less trouble with it later. Now I'm ready to go ahead and break this. So I'm going to, this was a tough one.
Is it a tough one?
Well, I'm going to resort to violence here.
It wasn't dry enough? Or?
Nope, my fingers weren't strong enough.
Oh.
I picked a good sturdy one. I'm going to have to step on it again.
So what kind of root was this? Or
This is dogbane.
Dogbane?
This is a stalk from a plant that's not gathered while it's green. It's gathered when it's dormant in the winter. Hang on a minute while I do this up here. I think I may be able to crush it with my hands now. Yeah, it's a little bit thinner up here. Just follow this crack all the way up.
it just amazes me that something this as ordinary as, basically a twig can be turned into
That's right. And not every twig is going to have this kind of ability to make something. And this is really pretty special to have a plant that has this kind of fiber inside it.
Well, it's amazing that the Ohlone could figure it out, from, just looking at it and
In a way,
just using what...
instead, you go to the grocery store, you know exactly where to find the bread, right?
Right.
And the milk. So, 350 years ago, you're not going to the grocery store. You're going to a great big grocery
Oh,
store.
yeah.
And
The world was a grocery store.
People knew where the things that they needed were. So it's not too different than going to the grocery store now. Well, it was different, but
But they
the
had,
same
I think they
idea.
were closer
you
to
know
the.
about what you need.
They were closer to nature, so that they saw resources that we would probably just drive by or walk by and say, "Oh, that's just an ordinary twig or branch," and they turned it into something beautiful, like a cordage purse there.
It's true. When today we're as dependent on say on nature as we ever were. Everything we eat was once alive.
Oh yeah.
But we tend to forget that because it comes from a grocery store instead of our backyard. So I think that's the nature of one of the big differences between the modern culture and culture in California 50 years ago.
We're not directly tied to nature. It's more of an indirect connection there.
Our personal lives aren't tied to nature. But we are still tied to nature. We don't have to acknowledge it. So what you can see I'm taking off here is a lot of material that's
fiber.
can be used as my cordage. It is the fiber from the plant. When I roll it over my hand like this, I'm recovering fiber. When I pull it down like this, you see I've stripped the fiber from here.
Oh wow.
And when I break it, you can see it's still attached. I recover what would have been lost if I continued stripping this way. I would lose all this. So the backwards motion captures it.
A little trick and a little skill to